How do you help the clinicians who work for you navigate this somewhat what people refer to as an imposter syndrome, given your own experience with it as far as not feeling ready or worthy? What do you say to
I mean,
new
it's funny
people?
because I have interns at my school job, and we talk about this all
Mm,
the time, that the imposter syndrome is real. I think I know as a school social worker, I had it for many years before I gained some confidence. And it's something that takes time, and especially in the private world. You think private practice, and, I think when I was younger, I put all these private practitioners on this pedestal that they must know so much
mhm.
more than I do. And that's where time and experience comes in. Like we're supposed to be a little insecure at the beginning of our careers. Right. I believe that because we're new to it. So those things take time. And my practice started by bringing other school social workers in. So it was easy to coach them that, listen, this is so much easier than what we do in some ways in terms of engaging, because we're engaging with people who actually want to be there and get help. So it's a different take. So to kind of pass on my experience of what I've done, and I always try to pass on where I've made mistakes, where I've struggled, and be honest with my real doubt, because doubt is with us all the time.
Yes, I'm thinking about the way you describe. I understand. I've had interns over the years too, in many different settings that I worked. So I'm imagining how much of an asset you are to the interns that you're
Yeah.
really giving them good advice and encouraging them. And even I'm sure to the new clinicians who are in your practice, I mean, that must be wonderful for them to have, all the wealth of experience that you have that you're bringing in.
I mean,
I'm not sure
that's
if
the
they,
part I love about my job, is working with
yeah,
the new interns and new people. I am one of the things that's different about my practice is most of my people who come to my practice at this point have lots of experience. So it is a difference because we give them experience
yes,
in,
that's
in a
right.
different
That's
private
right.
setting, but they have lots of experience to build on. But when you first get in this field, man, imposter syndrome, every intern, and I've been blessed that I've had some really good interns that have stayed in touch with
That's
me.
good.
So I could still say, like, I wanted to create a practice that was different. I wanted to create something where people had experience, people were highly trained. And it wasn't just, seeing all these people. It was really, how do we really match these kids and these adults with the right people? And to be honest with you, it was a slower build than someone who could build a big practice if in other ways. And I was very, very picky about who I hired.
Well, selective, you can say.
Selective. Okay. That's better. That does sound better, I guess.
No, it is being, but the point is you have a standard, which is a sign of a great leader, right? You have a goal, you have a mission, and you wanted to separate yourself from others, and you didn't just want to plug a hole in like you would have probably seen when I worked in health clinics
Yeah.
that they just want to fill this person that we'll just hire them
Hired
and
somebody to
and
do
then
it. And
let them.
that's where it
Yes,
was
yeah,
different. It was like, this was my individual practice.
it was your baby. Yes, yeah,
And if I'm going to bring somebody in, I wanted to make sure it had the same integrity and commitment, and that is very aligned with me. Right. And this wasn't my sole income, right? Because I had the school. That was my primary income. So like this was, I don't want to say it was, but I could do it differently. It wasn't about how
hmm,
much,
yes.
it was able to really take care of clinicians and attract good clinicians. And maybe I would make less, but I wouldn't need less because I have the other thing. And it was a totally different mindset to go into it, where you can, from the beginning, it was focusing on quality rather than quantity. So, and that, led me into this, like, I call it accidental leadership, and all of a sudden I'm in charge of, these things. And I do like to lead, in terms of, I'm very proud of what we built, and we built something with integrity.
It certainly shows, and the way your expression and the way you describe it, and knowing you, the pride that you take in the work you do. Have you ever faced a moment that changed everything? A loss, a new path, or an awakening that forced you to rewrite your life? Pivot Point is a podcast that explores those stories. I'm Nick Michael. We'll dive into how pain can spark growth and how crisis leads to clarity. Subscribe to Pivot Point today. Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm your host, Nick Michael. This podcast explores the moments when competence meets limitation, not because someone has failed, but because they've outgrown the container they're working with. These are the pivot points that emerge when skilled, dedicated professionals begin to sense that the work they love is no longer large enough to hold what they know they're capable of offering. Some pivot points arrive through external disruption, a reorganization, a budget cut, or a system that no longer aligns with your values. But other pivot points are internal. They build quietly over the years of showing up, doing meaningful work, and yet feeling an increased tension between purpose and possibility. These are the moments when someone realizes that the question isn't whether they're good at what they do, it's whether staying where they are honors the full scope of who they're becoming. Today's conversation is with Gordon Gooding, a licensed clinician and school social worker, founder and director of Gooding Wellness Group in Cold Spring Harbor, New York. For nearly 3 decades, Gordon has worked inside the Long Island public school system, supporting students from pre-K through 12th grade. His career has placed him on the front lines of crisis intervention, family systems work, and community mental health. But like many dedicated professionals who give deeply to their work, Gordon eventually confronted a question that changes everything. What happens when the work you love begins to feel too small for what you know you're capable of offering? His story isn't about leaving something behind. It's about expansion. It's about recognizing when your skills, values, and sense of purpose are calling you towards something more, even when the path forward feels uncertain and the risks feel real. In today's conversation, we explore the tension between stability and growth, the quiet courage it takes to build something new while honoring existing responsibilities, and how self-doubt doesn't disqualify you from leadership. It often accompanies it. Gordon's journey offers insight into what it means to take ownership of your professional trajectory, to challenge limiting beliefs about what's possible, and to discover that the capacity for change has been developing inside you all along, even when you couldn't see it yet. This is a story about agency, resilience, and the realization that meaningful change rarely arrives as a single dramatic moment. It's built through sustained effort, deliberate choices, and the willingness to move forward even when the outcome remains uncertain. If you've ever felt the pull towards something more while simultaneously questioning whether you're ready, capable, or deserving, this conversation is for you. Gordon, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on Pivot Point Strategy for Change, and I'm grateful for your willingness to share your story with our listeners. And before we dive in, I do want to mention that I recognize how personal and vulnerable these conversations can be. The pivot points we explore here often touch on moments of uncertainty, self-doubt, and courage, the kind of experiences that aren't always easy to revisit, let alone share publicly. So thank you for trusting this space and for being willing to reflect on your journey with such openness. Today, I'd love to hear about a pivot point in your life that feels significant to you, a moment or period when something shifted, when you recognized that change was necessary, or when you made a decision that altered your path in a meaningful way. And as we talk through your experience, know that we can explore as much or as little as feels right for you. And if there are other pivot points in your story, other moments of transition or transformation that you'd be open to discussing, I absolutely welcome the opportunity to have you come back in the future to have a conversation about it, because I know the work you do, the insights you carry, and the challenges that you've navigated are exactly the kind of experiences that can help others who might be standing at their own crossroads. So, Gordon, tell us, what pivot point would you like to share with us today?
Well, Nick, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I love this concept. I'm a big, I never put it in that words of pivot point, but I love the idea of when something happens to us, we have two choices. We can go with it or we can respond differently, right? So I love the idea of how do we respond to adversity? How do we respond to challenge? How do we respond to being stale in some way? So yeah, the topic I was going to talk about today was really more career focused, but I would be lying if it didn't incorporate many different aspects of me personally and some of my own experiences of what I've gone through in life. But as you know, I'm on year 30 as a school social worker, which is fascinating and unbelievable that we've been doing this for so long.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Time just flies, you know. I mean, at that point in my career where now the kids I used to have are coming in and registering their kids. So it's like, wow, this is, I've been here for a while now. But the topic I was going to talk about was my incorporation of moving from this public sector and schools to about 15 years ago, I started pivoting into private practice. So I can really work with families, work with individuals, and do a much more thorough job than sometimes you're capable of doing in the schools. And somehow this point of shifting to a private practice, everything kind of shifted for me. The practice itself has grown from an individual practice into I think, I feel very proud of the practice I've built, where I was able to build something very different in terms of private practices, which I could talk about a little later of why it's different. But it really went from being able to do a little bit of like school social work, I always call it, is like triage. You get helping and you're putting Band-Aids on it, to really started getting into working more directly with families and how we can really support them and really help them overcome the obstacles they're growing. So it's been a huge transformation. And to say that it was full of fear, it was full of doubt. I had moments where I didn't think I should do it or could do it. But as I look back now and I'm talking to you, like, I am so grateful of the experience of the path.
So what was it like? I know for everyone, because the office I had two locations at one point, and I had new clinicians coming in, and many of them struggle with that big leap. But they already made that decision before they called me, because they're calling me for office space
Yes.
and they want to share. Now you have a practice and you have clinicians working with you, very similar, where you're working with new clinicians sometimes, or somebody's joining you. So what was it like for you after, I think you said 16 years being essentially in the school system and working your job, and then realizing I need to open my shingle, I need to put my practice out there. I went through the same thing. What was it like for you, and what were those moments like? Because that sounds like a very pivotal time for you in your life.
It was. I mean, you know, you do something for, at the time, it was 14, 15 years. You do something for 15 years. I love the job, but it was the same thing over and over, you know, like it's the same type of problems, same type of, challenges in terms of parents and administration and the limited capacity we have as social workers to make bigger differences in the
Hmm.
school. So, you know, it's at a point where it's like you can keep doing this and looking ahead to another 15 years. I was like, wow, this is going to be exhausting. And this is going to, in some ways, I was getting bored mentally, right? Like I love what I did, but it was like you wanted something more. You wanted to make a bigger impact. So that's where I I figured out, let me I always say, dip my toe in the water and try to go into this individual practice and see what happens. And it didn't hurt that my kids were young. We needed
Hmm.
some more income. You know, all of that was part of it, but it was mostly based on, doing the same thing over and over again. And I need to mix it up. I need something different.
So if you bring us back to that moment, then, if you can think about, you might have been wrestling with this thought about opening your practice probably years before you actually did. So I like to focus on the cognitive, the emotional, and then the behavioral shift that occurs, because that's when you make the decision. People make those decisions, then they seek you out if they want to work with
Yes.
you now,
Yeah.
or they basically then they take the plunge, and now they're starting to look for office space. At least that's what it was like years ago. Presently, you can do things online, but even if they're looking to sublet or work from somewhere, even in a clinic, there that thought has already been made for them. What was it like for you back then?
You know, my story of beginning, I think, is a funny one. And it is a pivotal point because my thinking was, I work with people. I have great relationships. I know how to do this work. And all I got to do is just kind of get some clients. And
Hmm.
I was interviewed and was offered a position at a group practice. And quite honestly, I was like, well, I didn't want to split the fee. I was like, well, that
Makes
doesn't
sense,
seem
though.
right. Right. Looking back, now listen, it's a great practice. I refer to them today. Like they were 100% right. I was just really stubborn and didn't know what I was doing. Right. So I guess I was a little naive and not understanding how the world works in terms of you getting a first client. So I turned that job down and it took me another 8 months to get my first client. I think it was an important 8 months because it was full of frustration. It was not as easy as I thought it was going to be in terms of getting your first client from scratch. I was able to lock down an office where I was a sublet from somebody, but the thinking in my head was, oh, people are doing this all the time. It should be easy. And I was a little stubborn. I wouldn't take help from a group practice, and it ended up taking me a lot longer.
Well,
And
yeah,
thank goodness, like today, I'm
that's what
so
I was gonna,
glad. Yeah,
that's what I was
like
gonna say,
that
because
was exactly the way it was supposed to be.
and I think that's what many people struggle with, where the term "it is what it is," that it
Yeah,
became what it was, right?
yeah,
Because to your advantage, if you want to call it stubbornness or just being a typical guy who doesn't want to
yeah,
share, or that's fine,
yeah,
and that's what.
whatever. Yeah,
But it worked to your advantage. You still stuck it out. So even in those 8 months, what stopped you then from calling them back and saying, "Hey guys,
I would be lying if I didn't think about it. If I
yeah,
told you I
please,
didn't
no,
think about
that's the honesty
it.
that is so
The
wonderful
real
to hear."
truth is, after a couple months, I'm like, God, maybe I really and I didn't burn a bridge. We left on good terms, but I was like,
Mhm.
maybe I really did make a mistake here. Uh, but I just kept going forward, and I can't say at the time when you look at it, it was just like I wanted to make this work. And I just kept putting feelers out there and networking as much as I can and doing everything I can. But yes, there was lots of doubt of I should just go there. It would have been a much quicker growth, but it wouldn't have been as meaningful. Right?
So for many people wanting that quicker growth or quicker fix and getting frustrated along the way, what could you say to them when I went through the same thing several months before I got my first private, let's say, patient, right? Not the one when I used to train at a clinic in Manhattan, so I would see people there. But when I got my office in Great Neck, boom, it took several months. So what do you say to new people that are really struggling with what's going on here? It's taking too long and
I always believe, and I wholeheartedly believe this, we learn more from failure than we do success.
mm,
So if I would have said forget that and I would have gotten a client just by luck and everything, I wouldn't have learned anything. Right? I learned that 8 months. I learned how important was networking was. I learned the value of getting a client yourself and what value that is. Uh, so that struggle, as much as and any struggle I face, personal, professional, relationships, you name it, like the struggle is where you hate it, and that's where you learn. Like
well said.
that's where all the growth happens. Not in success, but in the struggling, in the mud, in the fighting, in the clawing your way through this mud pile. That's where you learn. I look back throughout my life, and it's always been those moments of struggle that have led to something good. And it
I
never
love that.
felt good in
Yeah.
the moment. Let's just be clear.
No,
Like it sucks
absolutely.
in the middle.
So there's always something though that continues to drive someone to do something that isn't working yet. But there's a part of you that has to put blinders on and disregard what others are saying, or really like the reality. If the reality is several months of nothing coming in or no one contacting you, and you're still pounding the pavement in your own way, you're not going door to door, but you're sending information out, right? Um, so then what kept you going?
I do think some of it's stubbornness. I will say that, especially when this case was like, I couldn't believe that, it's got to be this hard, So there is a stubbornness to me. Like when I put my head to something, I really go for it. And uh,
That's wonderful to hear.
the results,
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear.
yeah. I mean,
That personality part of you worked to your advantage in your own time. You needed to
yes,
process. Yes, yeah.
and I can point times out where maybe it doesn't work to my own advantage, but in many cases it does because I did want to do this. Did want to do it once I learned how hard this was. I did want to see what I can do with it. If I can grow this on my own without needing somebody else. I had some faith in, the good thing of working in a school system at the point with 15 years is you face everything. Like you just face the most difficult people, the greatest people, the nicest people, the toughest people, like you just get to engage with everybody. So like in my heart, I knew I had the skill set that if somebody wanted to come for help, I would be able to do that, because most of my job, I'm helping people sometimes don't want the help, right? So it was a little stubbornness. It was a little holding on to a vision that maybe was ideal, but it was holding on to the vision that I saw something and I wanted this to happen.
Wonderful. You mentioned in our conversations that you once put private practitioners on a pedestal. what did you believe that they had that really you didn't? I'm just curious about that because everyone has to make that leap. And I honestly, I think sometimes people make the leap a little too soon nowadays. Not again. I worked in hospitals before and for years before I went into the school system, having the school job, the hospital job, and then finally decided, boom, I've got to do the practice. But what happened? What was your process like? Because you were in your head, like we all get.
Yeah, I think that, listen, I think what motivated me was, and like you, I think sometimes some people, young people are getting in too soon to private practice now. Like I know I first got into private practice. I was probably with the school system, probably 5 or 7 years, and my kids were little, and I worked at another group practice someplace for a couple of years, and then it became too much with the kids. But when you're in a school and you're referring to clinicians and you're talking to outside
Hmm.
therapists, you get a sense of, well, quite honestly, you get a sense of what's going well out there and what's not. You got therapists that understand what these kids are facing, and you got therapists that really don't. So there was a little bit of confidence building, being like, I know I can do what that person's doing,
Hmm.
or I know, like, I know more than that person. All right, not to build myself up, but there was
Hmm.
the more I learned about these people and saw it. Yes, I was totally intimidated by it, and it took time to gain confidence that, wait a second, I'm doing that now, right?
Yes.
I could totally do that. And maybe even this clinician who's in a private practice in an office doesn't really see the full world kids experience.
Mm.
Or we're on a playground, or we're with the parents in the school meetings, or we're seeing the struggles with homework. It's a
Hmm.
use that, like, that different viewpoint I had, I feel like became my advantage, if that makes sense.
You
So
know,
that built my
you
con.
s- you say it so well, and I know you said your school experience was actually preparing you, but you couldn't see it then. So what finally helped you recognize that your background was an asset and not a deficit?
I think it was time. I think it was once I finally got a client, or a couple of clients, and especially some younger kids and teens, like, talking to the parents and talking to the kids, they knew I know what it's like in a school. They knew I know what the lunch period's like. I know what the social media as that came into, like, I
Yes.
understood that in a different way than someone who just can sit in an office. And there's nothing wrong with someone who just sits in an office, but it's a different viewpoint of understanding two worlds. Like, I know there's a private world and how we help, and we know what these kids and these families are facing every day in a public school system and in their communities.
You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like a deeper dive into the work we explore on the show, I invite you to visit my Substack page where I share in-depth articles and reflections. How do you help the clinicians who work for you navigate this somewhat what people refer to as an imposter syndrome, given your own experience with it as far as not feeling ready or worthy? What do you say to
I mean,
new
it's funny
people?
because I have interns at my school job, and we talk about this all
Mm,
the time, that the imposter syndrome is real. I think I know, as a school social worker, I had it for many years before I gained some confidence. And it's something that takes time, and especially in the private world. You think private practice, and, I think when I was younger, I put all these private practitioners on this pedestal that they must know so much
hmm.
more than I do. And that's where time and experience comes in. Like, we're supposed to be a little insecure at the beginning of our careers. Right. I believe that because we're new to it. So those things take time. And my practice started by bringing other school social workers in. So it was easy to coach them that, listen, this is so much easier than what we do in some ways, in terms of engaging, because we're engaging with people who actually want to be there and get help. So it's a different take. So to kind of pass on my experience of what I've done, and I always try to pass on where I've made mistakes, where I've struggled, and be honest with my real doubt, because doubt is with us all the time.
Yes, I'm thinking about the way you describe. I understand. I've had interns over the years too, in many different settings that I worked. So I'm imagining how much of an asset you are to the interns that you're
Like, yeah.
really giving them good advice and encouraging them. And even I'm sure to the new clinicians who are in your practice, I mean, that must be wonderful for them to have, all the wealth of experience that you have and that you're bringing in.
I mean,
I'm not sure
that's
if
the
they,
part I love about my job is working with the
yeah,
new interns and new people. I am one of the things that's different about my practice is most of my people who come to my practice at this point have lots of experience. So it is a difference because we give them experience
yes,
in
that's
a
right.
different private
That's right.
setting, but they have lots of experience to build on. But when you first get in this field, man, imposter syndrome, every intern, and I've been blessed that I've had some really good interns that have stayed in touch with
That's
me.
good.
So I can still say like, look at you, you're doing it.
So how did you protect yourself from burnout while creating something that at first increased your workload? There's that balance where you have the daytime and
Yes.
then you have the afternoon, nighttime, or maybe Saturday and Sunday. I used to work on Saturdays in the city, and it was great because that's when parents would bring their kids, and I'd find parking, and I'd be there all day, and I'm done, and I go home. So I worked 6 days a week. But what's that like?
If I'm
You know,
being really honest,
yeah,
not that I got burnt out, but it came at a cost. Right. I mean, I really put everything into this practice for a number of years. It was, I was working in the school and doing a couple of nights a week here and Saturdays, excuse me, and then trying to bring in new clinicians to help, offer more services. When you start something, especially it's a passion project because I have this vision of not just providing therapy, but providing high quality therapy with highly experienced and highly trained people. That was my vision. And I was very driven by that I didn't get burned out, but it did take a toll because my life got out of balance. I was overworking. Right. And I think over time, if I could go back and do it again, I would have liked to do it a bit more balanced. But then over time, as the practice grew, I was able to hire people who I had confidence in, who had a lot of experience, and that could help me kind of carry the load. People, especially who our visions were very aligned, that we're here not just to do therapy and see as many people as possible, but how do we match this client with the therapist that I think is going to be ideal for them? Not just any therapist, but really making those important matches. With burnout, it was, I don't think I was on the edge, to be honest with you, right? But the more I backed off and asked more for help, again, I'm just as enthusiastic about it today as I was, 10 years ago.
no, I hear you. I'm pulled into two different directions with the next question because I wanted to hear about what kind of burnout were you experiencing, both emotionally, mentally, physically, and then I wanted to talk about you also had a pivot to become a leader because you were leading your practice. So that came later. So you have these moments where you transformed.
Yeah.
Similar, I've always been a solo practitioner, but then I picked up a couple of offices and then sublet. So I've always done the subletting to other clinicians for themselves. So which one do you want to?
I mean,
I leave it to you.
I would go with the leadership because we can always come back to the other one, but the idea of leadership was very, I think it's very funny for me because the goal was never really, I didn't really set out to have this group practice of all these clinicians. It was like, I always say my group practice is totally accidental. I know it sounds weird, but it was like, wasn't really ever about growing it for growth's sake. It was just about this, how do, as more needs came in, how do we scale it with integrity? Right. Not just finding bodies, finding people to be the therapist, but how do I connect with some really good people? And it all started with school-based social worker who have a lot of talent, but they don't want to have a private practice. Right. So that idea of, because I had the other job, I wanted to create a practice that was different. I wanted to create something where people had experience, people were highly trained. And it wasn't just, seeing all these people. It was really, how do we really match these kids and these adults with the right people? And to be honest with you, it was a slower build than someone who could build a big practice if in other ways. And I was very, very picky about who I hired.
Well, selective, you could say.
Selective. Okay. That's better. That does sound better, I guess.
No, it is being, but the point is you have a standard, which is the sign of a great leader, right? You have a goal, you have a mission, and you wanted to separate yourself from others, and you didn't just want to plug a hole in like you would have probably seen when I worked in health clinics.
Yeah.
they just want to fill this person, that we'll just hire them
hire somebody
and
to
and
do
then
it.
let
And
them.
that's where it
Yes,
was
yeah.
different. It was like, this was my individual
It
practice.
was your baby. Yes, yeah.
And if I'm going to bring somebody in, I wanted to make sure it had the same integrity and commitment, and that is very aligned with me. Right. And this wasn't my sole income, right? Because I had the school, that was my primary income. So like this was, I don't want to say was, but I could do it differently. It wasn't about
Hmm.
how much,
Yes.
it was able to really take care of clinicians and attract good clinicians. And maybe I would make less, but I wouldn't need less because I have the other thing. And it was a totally different mindset to go into it, where you can, from the beginning, it was focusing on quality rather than quantity. So, and that, led me into this, like I call it accidental leadership, and all of a sudden I'm in charge of, these things. And I do like to lead, in terms of, I'm very proud of what we built, and we built something with integrity.
It certainly shows, and the way your expression and the way you describe it, and knowing you, the pride that you take in the work you do, it's wonderful to see it and to hear about it right now. I just want to let you know, because I'm imagining, as a leader, you can also, what could be useful for others, not just in this podcast, but also probably to share that in an in service, or in a training or a conference, or even in a article or book. I imagine all that would be so useful for someone right at that edge where they reach the point where they're in practice, and they may want to take the next leap
Yeah.
into managing a group practice, which is
I mean,
not easy to
it's
do.
not easy to, well, even if it,
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's how do we itch that itch, right? Like if I had just
Yes.
stayed there, I don't think I'd be as fulfilled in my life today, right? In terms of, if I was doing the same thing over and over again for 30 years, to have this mix up and to be able to work with other clinicians, some with school background, some with not, right? To work with, I have marriage and family therapists that I don't really do with couples, but I've learned so much from them. So like, to
Mm,
bring these people in with this vast experience and knowledge, I get to learn, we get to collaborate, and I don't want to sound corny, but it's fun. It's exciting. Then I bring it back to the school because I see it through a different lens. So like each
yes.
place I bring a different lens. So like from the private practice, I'm able to understand the school world and really know what families are facing. And I often fight with people in my school now that no, your 8-year-old should not be on a virtual appointment with your therapist because that's what's on your insurance.
You know, I can certainly say exactly. I know exactly what you're saying, and I feel exactly like you do, which is just so. I just, well, how often can you really say that to someone?
Yeah, because it is a gift to be in both worlds, because
Yeah.
most people in our school world see everything through a school lens, and most people in the
Yes.
private practice
Yes.
world see it through a private practice lens.
And they have
Yes.
practically no awareness on the other side. So, a question now about, for professionals who feel stuck, what's the first diagnostic question they should ask themselves that you would guide them to? It could be anywhere in your practice or in the schools, someone who,
I like to use a lot of like, if what would you want if you could have it? Right? Like what would it be like? What would it look like? I mean, I pictured myself not in a group practice, but I pictured myself working with people individually long before I got the first client, right? And I knew that was something I wanted. So what is it that you want in yourself? What do you see? And then we back up and say, well, how do we get there? Right? What are the steps? And that could be anything. Sometimes people take on, musical instruments, or they take on a different hobby, or I know people,
right,
I
right,
used to marathon run. I remember thinking, I want to run a marathon one day. And all of a sudden I had to just stop and think, how do you get there? It just starts by just doing the next thing. Do the next right thing, do the next right thing. One step leads to two, two steps leads to three. And yes, there's going to be setbacks and there's going to be pain. But if we keep going, it does happen. There's no magic formula. I think the
right.
big magic formula I think I look at with a lot of people is it grit? I love grit. Right?
Yeah,
You
that
could be
term
the
grit.
smartest
Yeah,
guy in the world and know everything, but if you don't have the grit to keep going when you get, punched in the gut, that makes the difference.
that resilience you're talking about.
Yes, resilient.
Well said. What I'm curious, how would you counsel someone who longs for change but feels paralyzed by the fear? And not just a clinician, but just
Anyone?
anyone. And
No,
if they came to you, yeah,
yeah,
someone who you were longing for change, or you felt an itch, we all did, and then realized there's got to be more out there. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. This is on autopilot, right?
yes,
The daytime. And here it's a challenge, and it's exciting, and it's improved your both your worlds. You have two worlds, and they've improved, and your
yes.
personal world as well.
Yeah.
So for those standing at that cusp where they're really many people are afraid to move forward.
Yeah, I think what we get, and I talk with my clients about this all the time. And I have some and you'd be surprised. I have some very successful people who feel very stuck.
Oh,
Maybe
not
this is their
surprising.
career and they're looking to transition to retirement, but they're afraid of it. Whatever it is, or how they see themselves, they want to do something differently, and it just seems too much. The thing I like to focus on the most is it's so easy to tell me what you can't do, but tell me what you can, right? It's so easy to say, I can't leave my job and have a private practice. No, but what can you do? Can you start talking to private practice? I can't play an instrument, but you can, look at videos on YouTube. What can you do? Right. So that's probably a overused line I use with my clients all the time when they want to set a boundary with their loved ones. And they're like, well, this is how it's always been. All right. So where can we do it? No, where can we set the limit? What's the easiest step to set a limit with somebody? So it doesn't feel like this big. It only feels this big. And then we work our way up to bigger steps.
And you're focusing on these strengths, which
Yes.
is really the accomplishments,
Because
and then
it
trying to
can be
transfer.
overwhelming, especially, I work a lot of people with behavioral issues and behavior patterns that have been ingrained from childhood. And they feel like, well, I have to be the people pleaser. I have to be, I have had these roles my whole life, and to push back on it is let's just take a little step. What can we do? Just pick one thing we can do, and then we build on that.
I'm always struck by how when we are overwhelmed, everything looks huge.
It's huge.
And what you did was just partialize it. What they would say, scaffold it, right? The question went back to the strengths and highlighted what somebody's familiar with and what they do very well with, which is wonderful to hear. I'm curious go ahead.
No, no,
No.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious with how did it turn out for you? You have a family and you're trying to start a new practice, and the struggle with trying to keep it going or doing it. What was that like emotionally? Because I think that's a struggle for most people. They will come up with a reason to say that the negatives will outweigh. They catastrophize. They might determine that the glass is half empty, and I'm afraid, and they will stop. So when somebody's a family man like yourself, you have a lot weighing on your shoulders. And for others out there who may want to start a business or something, or go back to school, how do you come up with rationalizing that and providing both financially, emotionally for them, for you? What was that like, or how do you approach that?
It's a really interesting question. When I look back over my process, it's always built on steps. Like everything I experienced before I was even a social worker, when I was a child, and all my struggles as a young person built me into this next role, right? So it's always been kind of built off other things. The idea of the balance is I did recognize, I found mine. Let me back up. I found a lot of different lessons as I walked through my adulthood. One of them being mindfulness, and the idea
Mm,
of,
great.
John Kabat-Zinn. There was a line in one of his books where he talks about, when I go to work, that's not my time, but when I come home, that's my time. And he challenged that thought, and he said, well, what? Our time is always our time, whether you're at work or not. And it was like really hit me very strongly because it was a mindset shift where it was like,
Yes.
what can I do with the time I have? I can go home and watch TV for 3 hours, right? Or I could put a little step into this thing, and I like to use the word deliberate a lot because it's not just, well, I'm waiting for the next thing to happen or I'm waiting for an opportunity to come up, but how do I get deliberate about making opportunities happen? And then even when I get all this, or in terms of practice and this success, it can distract from my family time. So now I need to say, I need to be really deliberate about when I'm home, and sometimes I'm good at this, sometimes not, right? Is making sure the phone's down, making sure, I'm there with my kids. And I would lie to you if I said I was
Be
successful every time. I wasn't, but I really have to make those deliberate choices to be present.
and be and be present.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. That was the end word. Yes.
Yeah.
And be present. So if you could go back and sit with yourself in that month 8, back then in that year, when you still hadn't gotten traction, what would you say? And do you think that version of you would have believed it? Oh,
He would never have believed.
no.
I don't
Okay.
think so. I mean, in terms of where like I am today and where the practice is and that,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it was never the intention again to build a group practice. It was just to get a little couple of clients to see after school and build a little
Hmm.
things. Um, it's I also call it following the process, trusting the process, right?
Yes, that's,
I mean,
I love that word. Yes.
just you put the next forward footwork in. This was never a business plan to grow into this big thing, but I built it in response to what was actually happening in my community, right? What was actually happening. The phone kept ringing and I thought, oh my God, I have someone that would be great for that person. And I brought in Nicole to see that person, right? So like so it wasn't ever like, I'm going to set out to do this, this big thing. It was just being present and doing the next right thing. And, and listen, a lot of fear, when you get the second office, or when we went from 6 offices I mean, from 3 offices to 6, like there's rent, there's doubt.
What I'm always feeling wonderful to hear anyone in their lives when they find something that they connect with and they do it, because I admire so much of what you've been able to accomplish. And I can only imagine how bringing all these people with you, and truly you are leading them, and also the impact you're having on others in the community or even beyond this community nowadays with even being online. And that just is
It
wonderful. I
blows my
mean,
mind.
it's a
It
wonderful
blows my
story.
mind
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
like this all started with doubt. And the truth is, you got to have a good support system. When I first, we first got the second office, my wife was the one who said, hold on to the first office. And I'm like, what?
Mm,
Like, she has so much faith in me that I didn't have. Right. So like, you appreciate that. And to see what it's grown into and to see the impact, like you said, when you work with families, like we work with Wellbridge now, which is a rehab out in Calverton. We offer a
right.
free
Right.
parenting group every night now. So now we can give back some free resources to families, and we're working with one of the most highly respected rehabs on Long Island. I mean, in the area, really. And all it was is about just doing the next thing and doing the next thing. So it's I'm honored, but I'm also humbled by it because it's like it's beyond my wildest dreams, as many people say. Like this, and it is, as you know, it's an honor to be able to help people. And I take that very seriously.
Because it's a calling, it's a service, it's a connection, it's a passion, and that certainly comes through. I'm curious, I wasn't aware of that. Are there any other programs or any other populations that you service that, you
Yeah.
would like to
I
mention?
mean, we do a lot. I mean, we kind of service everybody. We have clinicians that just work with younger kids. We have clinicians that just work with teens. We have two marriage and family people who work a lot with couples and family works. We do a lot of collaborative where maybe one person's seeing the individual and the other person's working with the family. We're really,
That's a great value to
yeah,
have,
we
that
call it
if
like a
they're coming to you.
wraparound
Yeah.
approach. We're really big into trauma and EMDR now. Like we have really stepped up our training to a very, very high level that I'm very proud of. Right. And all that kind of stimulates new ideas and new growth. And now and this is my philosophy, whether it's right or not, because I'm a social worker, not a marketer, you know, it's how do we kind of inform the public about things. Like we have right now we're about to release a second one, but in the fall we released a free um, anxiety micro course where people signed up through our website, didn't cost anything, and for 7 days in a row you got an email to learn different aspects about anxiety, right? So again, maybe they'll call us, but maybe they'll learn something and they'll say, you know what, I need to go do this therapy. And if we can send that message out, that's a win for me, right? That's a total win. And we're doing something similar in the coming weeks with trauma, because trauma is, everybody's struggling with
Hmm.
trauma and we always don't like to talk about it. So like I like to try to normalize some of these things that even if you don't go to, and I always say that, even if you don't come to Gooding, we will always make sure you get somewhere because, you know, I just believe wholeheartedly in that.
No, that philosophy is so amazing, and not everyone carries that
Yeah.
kind
Because
of
it comes back.
uh,
You do good in the
focus.
world and
Yes,
it
it does
comes
come back.
back.
Yes.
It's karma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're a true advocate for therapy, for counseling, for change, and
Yeah.
whether or not they're coming to you. You're caring for people, and that it takes a special type of personality. You certainly have that, which I'm so impressed.
Well, and
Well,
again, like I went through things, right? So like I know in my darkest days when I was a young person
right.
struggling with things, people were there for me. So if I can be
Right.
that light for somebody else and connect them with somebody, man, life is good then.
Yeah, you're certainly paying it forward. I'm so struck by that. Gordon, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability, your honesty, and for sharing such a deep personal journey with us today. What you've described, the self-doubt, the year waiting for that first client, the nights away, or, building something uncertain, these aren't easy things to name out loud, and yet you did it with such clarity and courage. But what strikes me most about your story is how you reframed what many would consider limitations into your preparation. Your years in the school system, that wasn't holding you back from anything. They were equipping you, which is amazing to hear and to know. And your willingness to sit with what everyone now calls imposter syndrome, even now as a practice owner and a leader, it reminds us that growth and self-doubt can coexist. And you didn't wait to feel ready. You moved forward anyway. Your message is that we always have choices. It's both empowering and grounding, and it doesn't dismiss the weight of real constraints, but it refuses to let those constraints define what's possible. And that's a clinical insight. Yeah, and it's also a lived truth that anyone standing at a crossroads needs to hear. Thank you for building something that prioritizes care over profit, for modeling agency to your family, and to reminding all of us that resilience isn't a moment, it's a decade of deliberate steps. Your story matters so much. Once again, Gordon, thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
For everyone listening to Gordon's story, today I'm reminded that pivot points don't belong to one profession or one kind of person. Whether you're a clinician feeling the limits of your current role, an educator wondering if there's more you could offer, or someone in an entirely different field who's outgrown where you are, Gordon's experience speaks to something universal. The question isn't whether you have what it takes. The question is whether you're willing to challenge the belief that you're stuck. For clinicians specifically, Gordon's journey offers a roadmap. Years of training, work in systems, experience on the field, with real families in real crisis. These aren't limitations, they're the foundation. The skills Gordon has developed and any clinician in the field has developed, they're resources that everyone can benefit from being around and learning from. And if you're wrestling with imposter syndrome, I just want to mention, for people questioning whether you belong in that next chapter, know that Gordon built a thriving group practice while wrestling with those same doubts. But this conversation extends beyond clinical work. It's about recognizing that purpose and practicality don't have to compete. It's about understanding that the capacity for change has been developing in you all along, even when you couldn't see it. And it's about accepting that resilience isn't built in a moment of clarity. That grit, it's forged through sustained action, setbacks, and the willingness to keep moving forward when the outcome is uncertain. If there's one takeaway from today, it's this: change rarely arrives as lightning. It's built through deliberate action, through owning your direction, even when the path isn't clear, and recognizing that you don't need permission to begin. Not from your employer, not from your peers, and not from the voice in your head that says, you're not ready yet. Thank you for listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm Nick Michael. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who may be standing at their own crossroads. And remember, while we may not control every variable in our lives, we always have agency in how we respond and what we choose next. Until next time, I leave you all with one question. What's your pivot point?